Welcome back to the instructional video series on hierarchy of energy theory, where we unify all physics under one physical model. I am Scott Gordon, your host and creator. In our last segment, we showed that trying to find the theory of everything through experimentation or mathematical derivation bypasses the foundation of physics and leads us to failure. To succeed, we must know the underlying structure of space-time. The properties of space-time are currently taken for granted and are understood only by their mathematical representations. And while this was enough to build our current theories, it falls far short when trying to find the theory of everything. The goal in this video is to ascertain exactly what space-time is, what it's made of, and how its properties emerge from its internal structure. This is a lofty goal. Where do we start? We start by saying space-time must be made of something. What that something is must be very foreign to us, because that something is not a particle. Particles exist in space-time, and that something that composes space-time exists as space-time. All our experiments deal with particles in space-time, never exposing whatever it is that creates space-time itself. So the first step is to acknowledge that space-time is made of something. Hierarchy of energy theory proposes that space-time is composed of a building block. A building block that represents the ultimate reductionist approach. If it were possible to reveal this most basic ingredient of the universe, it would not only be the building block of space-time, but the building block of everything in the universe. Now you may ask, why have we not been able to find this building block in any of our colliders? That's a great question. But for now, I can only give a terrible answer. Because I said so. No, just kidding. Actually, there is a real reason, but you'll have to wait until you learn hierarchy of energy theory for that answer to become clear. Some of you may have an objection to proposing a fundamental building block that is not experimentally accessible. If so, then you may as well leave now and wait for one of your colleagues to tell you that you should have stayed. But for those of you who have an open mind, you will be one of the first to have a deep understanding of how the universe works. So how do we go about determining what the basic building block is? There are some clues which we can deduct from our current knowledge. The first clue comes from light. But why light? Light's not space-time. Well, here's why. If hierarchy of energy theory is the ultimate reductionist theory, it would mean that space-time's building block is not just a building block of space-time. It will serve in some manner as the underlying building block for everything. That would include a photon, which means that a photon would somehow share its properties with the space-time building block. So the first clue is that light is polarized. Polarization is an orientation of the photon or light wave as it moves through space-time, where its electric field is in a direction perpendicular to its forward motion, and its magnetic field is perpendicular to both the electric field and the direction of motion. The second clue is that it doesn't matter which direction light is moving within space-time. It retains the same speed along with its property of polarization. These observations give us some insight. Space-time must express the same properties in all directions. If space-time is the same in all directions, then the photon itself must have an internal structure that provides the mechanism for its electric field in one direction and its magnetic field in another. Let me repeat that. It is the photon that has the internal structure that determines its polarization properties. If the photon is composed of something that has a different structure along at least two directions, then so should the basic building block of space-time. In configuring the basic building block of space-time, it cannot have the property of length, since distance is a property that doesn't exist yet. So the only thing we can consider as the basic building block is a point. But a point is the same in all possible future directions and dimensions. How can we create a difference along two directions from just a point? We can accomplish this by adding a spin to the point. The spin creates two distinct directions: the direction that is on the plane of the spin and the direction that is on the axis of the spin. Now, some of you may have a problem with a spinning point proposed as the primordial building block of the universe. Don't make me laugh. Physicists seem to have had no problem believing that the fundamental particles are point-like structures that have spin. So again, if you have a problem, don't let the door hit you on the way out. The proposed building block of spacetime is a spinning point. The problem we face now is, where do we put it? It's the organization of building blocks that eventually form spacetime. But there is no spacetime and therefore no place to put the first building block, and yet it needs to be put somewhere. The first building block entity is placed in the true void. This is the state in which absolutely nothing exists. But what is the void? There has been many discussions on this topic with no consensus. Ironically, you will be able to understand the void much better, but only after you understand what spacetime is. I will return to this topic in later videos. For now, I will refer to the void as a state of infinite points where distance and time do not exist. When the first building block is placed in the void, basically giving the property of spin to one of the points in the void, the property of distance still does not exist, but we can introduce the concept of the relative distance. A relative distance is not a distance. There is no units of distance that exist yet. A relative distance just tells us that when points exist, these points can be relatively closer or relatively further from each other. Distance doesn't exist because a point has no length. And no matter how points exist along a line, there still is no distance. And let me demonstrate this. How many points are between my two fingertips? Well, it's infinite. Well, how many now? It's still infinite. And how many now? It's still infinite. No matter where the position is of my two fingertips, there's always an infinite amount of points between them. Points do not make distance. A line does have the property of distance, but it does not get its property of distance by the points along it. To sum up the features of the single building block universe, placing a single building block into the void creates the single building block universe and creates a relative spin of the points that concentrically exist around the spinning point throughout the entire single building block universe. These points can be conceived as being relatively closer and relatively further away from the spinning point. Again, there is no concept of distance, and there is no distance in this universe. In this single building block universe, there are only two directions: the radial direction along the building block's plane of spin and the axial direction of the building block's spin. So what does it take to place more building blocks into the single building block universe? That is the topic for our next segment. If you are curious about this novel approach to finding the theory of everything, then click the like button below and subscribe to this channel so that you can be notified when future lessons are released.